You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
At that point, I just wanted to do something bigger that was more impactful in the world. Back in 2016, hospitals were actually going to what we call open drug markets and purchasing medications and consumables from the market. So I identified that technology could really solve this issue by aggregating all of these pharmaceutical suppliers, but it exposed even bigger issues, which is that these companies just really didn't have the tools to support efficiencies within their businesses. Our plans are bigger than just Nigeria and bigger than just pharmaceutical marketplace.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find inspirational people who are doing inspirational things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have another special guest, Vivian Lawal, who is the founder of Medsaf, which is a curated medication marketplace for African hospitals and pharmacies. Welcome to the podcast, Vivian. How are you?
Hello, how are you doing? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Brilliant. If you've listened to the podcast before, I usually like to start from the beginning. So I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Vivian.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Vivian Lawal, and I'm the founder of Medsaf. I grew up in the U.S., so I'm from Chicago, went to school there and worked in the finance industry up until the financial crash of 2008-9-ish. And at that point, I just wanted to do something bigger that was more impactful in the world. You know, I was very disillusioned by the American dream at that point. And that's kind of the beginning of the journey of finding myself in Nigeria some years later and looking around to see how I could help support the improvement of Africa in general, but definitely Nigeria. And so a long journey that kind of led me to starting a pharmaceutical technology platform in Nigeria.
Awesome. So you detailed there, grew up in the US, worked in the financial industry, but wanted to transition and do something bigger and more impactful, specifically on the continent, which is Medsaf. So you're the founder of Medsaf. I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about the company, the work that you're currently doing in Nigeria, Africa, and what you hope to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. So what we found is that the traditional process of purchasing medications had a lot of problems within that process. So you have the major pharmaceutical manufacturers or importers like your Pfizer, Sanofi, Merck. You know, they may have financial infrastructure to really build out, supply chain systems to deliver medications to your hospital, but they only represent a small percentage of the total medication needs for the typical African hospital or pharmacy or clinic. And what I found back in 2016 was that hospitals were actually going to what we call open drug markets and purchasing medications and consumables from the market. And the market is, pretty much a traditional African market. And so you can kind of understand, some of the problems that come into that practice. One is, obviously quality control, but then also just the work that it might take to go somewhere and have to pick up very, very heavy shipments of medications is a mess and quite troublesome for hospital owners who are really just trying to do the right thing. So I identified that technology could really solve this issue by aggregating all of these pharmaceutical suppliers and manufacturers that had really great quality medications and available and connecting them to hospitals, pharmacies, or clinics anywhere in the country so that they could really just purchase exactly what they need, get some support with financing, have logistics support, and receive their medications within 24 to 48 hours turnaround time. And so that was the concept of Medsaf back in 2017 when we launched. And we've just continued to grow since then across Nigeria, but then also larger projects like government projects, as well as rural areas, specialty medications, really just trying to figure out how to make sure that everybody's needs are 100% catered for.
Thank you for that, Vivian. So you detailed the challenges that you saw in the African pharmaceutical industry and I guess the inspiration behind starting Medsaf. So if we look at you specifically in terms of what challenges did you face during the initial stages of starting the company?
A lot of challenges because back then, the world has changed drastically since 2017, and the business environment has changed drastically as well. And back then, everything was on paper. Everything was about relationships, and technology was not on the top of importance for decision makers, right? So not only was it not at the top of their mind, but also was huge knowledge gaps of just how to even use this, simple systems like, just an online marketplace. That was a struggle. So we actually had to go and help people learn how to use the system. But it exposed even bigger issues, which is that these companies just really didn't have the tools to support efficiencies within their businesses. So financial accounting or, warehousing, stocking, all of these different systems were either extremely expensive or were overcomplicated to the point where they'd have an IT person in the hospital, but then no one else would know how to use it. So if the IT person wasn't there, you can see that people would just kind of go around the system and revert back to paper. And so this is a great opportunity for like financial leakages and many other record keeping issues, but definitely just a big lack of transparency. So being able to help a hospital understand, what medications they need at any given moment in time, really was a much harder feat and was harder to kind of get us even really started because we're trying to be as lean as possible and purchase exactly the amounts that these clients need. And so we need numbers. And so it's very difficult in the beginning to help these hospitals understand even what their own numbers were. So that was something that I do think has changed drastically. There's so many different apps and software solutions that are just much easier to use and supportive for hospitals now. But that was not the case when I started. And then also, when I started, obviously it was a behavior change exercise as well. We really had to sensitize people on why caring about the quality of their medications would actually improve the healthcare outcomes that they're battling to address, and many times the owners of these hospitals wouldn't necessarily have, the full details about, where their procurement staff are going to go and purchase the medications. And so the concept of even battling quality control within the hospital for many owners is just a huge undertaking. And so we spent a lot of time, really just trying to teach people like, look, it's in your benefit to not just focus on price, which is, what everyone was focusing on, but also to focus on quality so that your patients continue to come back and trust you, And so those were some of the initial business challenges. And then definitely for Medsaf, around that 2017 timeframe, raising funds was much, much harder undertaking than it is in this type of environment today, and that was also something, just trying to sensitize people that this was something that was interesting, that's something that deserved funding. Some of the most feedback that I received back in those days was healthcare is not on our radar. We're not interested in healthcare. That was pretty much what everyone would say. But then obviously COVID-19, I think kind of shook the world to understand why healthcare should be an important part of your investment thesis, because clearly there's opportunities to make money, but then also it's important to move these industries forward using technology as well.
So you touched on an important point with regards to back when you started Medsaf, everything was on paper and technology wasn't even a consideration for many people within the industry. We know that technology is a big part of Medsaf. So with that in mind, how would you say Medsaf differs from other medication marketplaces and what unique value do you provide to your customers?
The reality is that we're much more than a marketplace. We're not just about, putting products online, but we really, from the very beginning, focused on utilizing data analytics to understand the needs of the market over time and using that crucial information to support suppliers and wholesale manufacturers and wholesale suppliers to understand what they need to have in time, in real time. So we've always focused on bridging the gap, the information gap between the two parties, and then building solutions or services to support those two sides of the ecosystem to be able to work more efficiently together. So, we're really a platform that's aggregated value-added services, service providers, and ensuring that, efficient flow of medications from point A to point B. So it's much deeper than a marketplace, though, our goal for a customer would be to really not have to think too much about it. Go to the platform, see what you need, purchase it, check out, get access to credit if you need, and make a payment, and then just have that delivery show up within 48 hours. So that's the customer experience. But on the back end of that has been a lot of partnerships and a lot of work around improving the ease of doing business for both sides. And so from our perspective, it's always been about how do we really kind of build on technology solutions so that it's an effortless or seamless experience. And so that's been, especially over the last couple of years, that's what we've focused on the most, is just making sure that we can provide off-the-shelf solutions to make it easier for people to get access to medications. We also were one of the first in Nigeria. So we did have, that first mover's advantage for quite a while. It allows you to build up the relationships, innovate around the failures and problems and things that you encounter on this business journey. But definitely our plans are bigger than just Nigeria and bigger than just pharmaceutical marketplace.
Brilliant, brilliant. Earlier, you gave us an overview of the state of the pharmaceutical industry back when you started and also the unique value that you add. So if we look at the industry now, what would you say is the current state of, say, Nigeria's pharmaceutical industry?
I'll talk about the healthcare industry in total. So, there are so many new types of specialty clinics and clinics in general, or hospitals, and investment in the healthcare ecosystem that just was not there when we launched. And so what this allows is for a deepening or a maturity in the types of medication products that are necessary to serve the market. And so that's a really awesome outcome for Nigeria in general, because, back in the day, it didn't matter how rich you were or poor, pretty much we're going to be at the mercy of an antiquated system. And so the advancements in the system, I think, have been great. But that being said, I think, especially the last 7 or 8 years, definitely the economy in general has taken a hit. And so there's less money in the system. And so what that means is that people don't have as much funds to travel out to receive healthcare. So it does focus people on trying to make their healthcare system at home much, much better. So there are issues there. And so what it does to the pharmaceutical industry is it requires there to be much more level of understanding of how to kind of meet this growth, but then also deal with, some of the economic challenges that are happening in real time. So, if I really think about today, we've just gone through almost a bomb that was blew up in the financial system here in Nigeria in the beginning of the year with the Naira redesign. That has a huge impact and ripple effect, right? People stopped wanting to put money into Nigeria, but then also majority of these products are imported. And so you now have a Naira crunch, but then you also have a dollar crunch, which is what you need in order to purchase supplies. So there's some good things, but definitely there's still a long way to go to support just kind of the growth of the pharmaceutical industry right now. Right now, I'd say it's a moment of contraction in the pharmaceutical industry. People are doing a little bit less, but that's always an opportunity to be more efficient. When we started, we really had to combat a lot of fraud. So we would go to a hospital and the procurement person would say, hey, this person gave us a TV. And we're like, well, we're not giving you a TV. So we're going to go talk to your boss. And that was always our strategy to, try to get the owners to understand how the efficiency in their system would allow them to root out bad actors and players within their company in those instances. But now everybody knows, regardless of whether they're the procurement person or the low-level person all the way up to the owner, they know that they need to be more efficient because there's just a lot less money in the system. And so that, really does drive new technologies, efficiency, cost savings, but then also just better business, right? Because if you're not plugging up those financial leakages, you are leaving yourself at risk for issues in your business. So there's a huge pressure to be as efficient as possible right now. So there's always a positive side to something negative happening, right? And that's where the pharmaceutical industry is right now.
Thank you for that, Vivian. So you detailed how the economic challenges have a ripple effect on the pharmaceutical industry, and it impacts the importation of important pharmaceutical products. So if we look at how you go about procuring medicine, what is your strategy? How do you go about procuring the medicine that you supply?
Yeah, so we're a facilitator of the ecosystem. So while we can import, we mostly are looking to help those really large importers, those large manufacturers, facilitate the movement of their medications to the end user. And so typically what happens in this ecosystem is that, everything is driven by money, right? So if I've spent $1 million on importing a product, I'm really not trying to break my bulk and sell, something to someone for 5 Naira, right? I've got to give it to the next biggest person to make my money back. That's typically how the market works. And so what we're doing is we're saying, well, because all of these clients are using our platform and we're not having to individually acquire each customer, we're driving traffic to our platform, we're able to then to get larger order sizes through to these manufacturers for less effort and funding. And so that's how we support the marketplace today. And so while we definitely see a downturn in options that might be available, as well as pricing and those types of things, we're not directly impacted by Naira fluctuations or dollar fluctuations or FX fluctuations, right? It's more of, okay, well, who needs what and where and when? And so these types of moments are always moments of expansion because you can do more for more people when you're, really leveraging technology well.
Brilliant. So you facilitate the movement of products from large importers. I know in Africa, you mentioned earlier, there is a problem with low quality or even counterfeit medicines. How do you ensure that none of these enter your platform or your supply chain?
So that's part of why, we're working with the larger players, right? So typically where the fake and or substandard medications come into play is when you are breaking bulk or you're really kind of taking those medications and altering them or selling them, or they're passing hands multiple times. So the first step of quality control is trying to cut out all of the middlemen that are existent between, the point of entry into Nigeria or the point of manufacturing to the end user. So that's our first point of quality control. The second would be the vetting of, the sourcing, our continuous vetting of sources, as well as, random testing and customer feedback. So we really just work on all of those things in tandem to ensure that customers are getting the best options available, and that we're really focusing on the good players in the market and avoiding the mistakes of working with some of the criminal aspects that do exist in Nigerian ecosystem.
So you slightly touched upon the quality control measures that you put in place and also the continuous vetting of sources, which are some of the biggest challenges faced within the healthcare industry in Africa. So looking out of those two areas, how is Medsaf helping to address some of the other challenges that might be faced within pharmaceutical or healthcare industry within Nigeria?
Well, definitely. I mean, the whole facilitation aspect of what we're doing and building solutions and services to improve efficiency is a huge part of helping the pharmaceutical and healthcare aspect of Nigeria. Another way that we really supported the ecosystem was really doubling down on how to offer credit in a sustainable way. What we found is that when you offer credit, that clients are able to increase their order size, but then also improve the quality of medications that they're purchasing. And so that was a big finding that we really just kind of doubled down on and tried to innovate around. So also I think that as a leader and as a first mover in this market, we're some of the first people to really kind of be banging the drum that, this healthcare ecosystem needs support. And we're able to get that message across around the world. And so I really do, and I get told this all the time, that the news about Medsaf or news about what we were doing inspired someone to do something in healthcare. And I think that even just important to even start to tackle this issue was important to help the ecosystem in general. It also helped some of the more established players start to level up, right? Start to think about, okay, well, technology could be a threat to our business in the future. So how do we, as large manufacturers, how do we actually also improve our offerings so that we can sustain our business through the next, decades of tech advancement? I hope that's a good answer to that question.
Perfect. Looking at the pharmaceutical industry, we know that globally it is heavily regulated for good reason. So are there many kind of regulatory hurdles or compliance requirements that you've had to navigate while scaling your business within Nigeria?
Yes, definitely. But the interesting thing I think I'll share with just you and your listeners is that what I found is that Nigeria is so overregulated that I really do believe that the over-regularization of the industry is part of the reason that you have this thriving gray and black market.
Yes.
Because it becomes so overburdensome to even do the right thing. So, for example, if I'm a manufacturer and I have 10 different types of medication that can impact and improve Nigeria. Well, you've got to register each one of those and go through that process of registering for each one. And it could take years. It could be, really expensive. And so what you find is that companies try to avoid Nigeria if they can. And so that leads to regular citizens going and trying to figure out how they can get access to something that they really need. And it becomes life or death when you start to think about specialty medications like oncology and those types of things that really do require R&D and variety for people to live. So yes, it's heavily regulated. But another interesting thing about just my experience is when we started, they didn't even have a category for us. They'd never been presented with a concept like Medsaf at the time. And so they didn't even know where to put us. What were we as an entity? So I think that was also just kind of an interesting piece of the experience of building this company, is that the regulations were not there specifically for what we were trying to do at the time. So we had to adjust.
Thank you for that. So I guess despite the hurdles that you've had to face and overcome, you've managed to make a huge impact in a short period of time. So I was hoping you could talk about some of your key or pivotal moments in terms of during your journey while starting Medsaf.
Well, definitely starting the company, it was pivotal. I would say the next big thing was COVID-19.
Okay.
Before COVID-19, we had been in Lagos and, our expansion plan was based off of really investing in the city or the ecosystem, hiring the teams and the more traditional way of thinking about moving to a new location. But COVID-19 allowed us to pick up customers from all over the country, people that we didn't know that just found out about Medsaf because we had, really done a lot of that work on our digital presence and our technological options to make it easier to procure medications. But then we'd also, built up a brand by that time that people trusted. And so getting the orders from, random rural locations, larger cities across the country allowed us to think differently about how we could actually work within Nigeria in a much more efficient way. I'd say the sad thing about the journey of Medsaf was that, at all these moments, just severely underfunded, So if I think about that COVID-19 time, we could have just done so much more, but we just had to be as efficient as we possibly could with what we had, And so those are some cool moments, right? Because it's kind of market validation. Okay, people are willing to figure out how to use technology so that they can get what they want. And we don't have to go visit them. We don't have to bring them coffee and cupcakes or whatever, and meet the MD and stay in their office for hours. They can actually literally just go online, purchase, and pay without us ever having to speak to them. And that was the thesis. That was the point, of the company, right? Like, can that happen? And so when that happened, it was like, okay, good. Nigeria is moving to kind of this next level. So I'd definitely say that. And I'd also say last year when we started to get our first large government projects, we could really realize that, we can really step up what we're doing for a larger clientele that has a much bigger impact. So, for example, the 2 states that we have now, they represent over 13 million people and 950 hospitals and clinics. So that's a significantly larger impact than we were making in the private sector. So that's an example of how I would just say those are some key moments in the lifespan of Medsaf.
Thank you for that. You touched upon a key point with regards to your expansion plan was more traditional until COVID-19 and you've slightly changed that. So what is your vision for the future of Medsaf and how do you plan to expand your reach and impact across the continent?
Well, definitely the larger projects allow us to do a deeper integration and tech development around pharmaceutical supply chain systems. And so we really see ourselves doubling down on that aspect. Our goal is to not own or touch or have any products. And so the goal it would be to be able to kind of grow into a situation where we are not in custody of the medications, but we're really just connecting the players using a technology.
So earlier you mentioned in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, how it affected or changed your expansion plan. So I was wondering, how did COVID-19 affect your operations and what measures have you had to put in place or adapt to that changing landscape?
Well, that was the harder part about COVID-19. I'm still not fully sure of just how I would kind of want to think about remote working, right? But that's definitely what we had to do. So we had to depend more on remote working tools. But I still think there's something about being able to touch base in person that is impactful that COVID-19 kind of took away from the team. So it kind of reduced, the team cohesiveness that had always been there, the team responsiveness that had always been there because we were remote, And so whether or not we've adapted 100% to remote work, I don't know yet. or if I think that's a good thing that happened, I don't know, but I do know that it does also then show you who are the people on your team that are the hard workers, that care, that are really putting the impact and those that are not. And so I'd say that maybe the outcome is that we realized that we could do more with less people, but I still think that in-person experience is important for companies.
I agree. I guess there's a debate with regards to a hybrid model, which tends to work quite well these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you touched upon in terms of COVID-19 brought about new trends in your work culture, which could be seen as a positive or negative. So looking at trends, what trends in Nigeria's pharmaceutical industry are you currently seeing that you're excited about?
So I mean, like I said, the trend of more specialty clinics leads to more specialty medications. And that means that people don't have to go online and buy something from India or have their cousin, bring something in from the UK, that they can actually get proper care here at home. And I think that's the trend that I'm really excited about, that there will be more options for people to have the medications that they really need to live the life that they want to live.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So moving forward from current trends and I guess looking at the future, where do you see Nigeria's pharmaceutical industry in, say, 5 years' time from now?
Well, I definitely think there will be a consolidation. I do, because efficiencies in manufacturing, efficiencies in technology will allow, one entity to do more, right? And by doing more, it means that they can produce more, but then also produce a wider variety. So I think that there will be a consolidation within the ecosystem that is coming. And with AI and 3D printing, those options are on the way. So I really think that there will be less players out there. And I think that that's good for the market because there's more control on quality. There's more control on processes. It will give the government a better control over just kind of how to manage regulations for this market. So I'm hoping that the bar to entry gets even higher, and that we, don't have as large of a black and gray market as we had when I first launched. So those are the things that I think should happen and will happen within the next 5 years.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So looking closer to home, where do you see yourself and Medsaf in 5 years' time?
Well, definitely we wouldn't be, storing medications or shipping medications, but more building that back engine for pharmaceutical and healthcare industry through way of software solutions. So it'd be more of the tech angle of pharmaceutical distribution.
And we know that with expansion, it requires a lot of capital. So do you have plans in terms of the investment? What's going to be happening in terms of your expansion plans from the financial side?
Well, definitely, we're focusing on some of our larger deals, which allow us to do more, make more money. And that's really, what you need to expand, right?
Yes.
How do we bring this company into sustainable profitability that allows us to continue to grow and strategically move to places where we're asset light, but then extremely impactful, so that's kind of the goal. And of course, the partners that want to come along on that journey, just being a little bit more thoughtful about that and just making sure that the partners really kind of help us get to that vision.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Not off the top of my head, but I do listen to mantra. I do listen to like positive affirmations if I'm having a really tough time, right?
Yes.
And I just cycle through YouTube. I put positive affirmations and then whatever kind of like speaks to me, I'll take some time to listen to it or meditate on it, and I just think, especially for entrepreneurs like me, it's easy to kind of be a bit of a perfectionist in a way. We're always going to be our hardest critics. But if I put myself in pre-Medsaf standpoint and I look at the things I've been able to do and what I've been able to achieve, even if it didn't reach my own goals, it's more than the average person is ever going to even dream about doing.
Yes.
And so I think, especially in the startup ecosystem, you get in this bubble and then people are always like, oh, how much did you raise? How much did I, and it's just like this focus on the wrong things. But then if you look at it from the perspective of the world, and you really just think about, okay, well, what have I been able to do? It becomes something that you can really just be proud of. And I think that the biggest thing that I had to do was tell myself I'm not afraid to fail, right?
Yes.
So if the company crashes tomorrow, I have learned so many things that I can bring forward and help other people do towards this goal that are going to be supportive and invaluable to my future. This is a school that, majority of people will never get the learning and training that I've had just on this journey alone. And so I think that just giving up control and just not being afraid to fail and just say, look, potentially this may or may not work out, but just being able to say that to yourself and let go is when you start to see things moving forward, sometimes when you're stuck, So I think that kind of mentality is what keeps me going.
Thank you for sharing that. I totally agree. Failure can hold you back from being entrepreneurial, experimenting, trying new things, being afraid of failing, which can be a huge blocker. So thank you for sharing that with us, Vivian. As we're coming to the close of the conversation, do you have any final remarks, any calls to action for people who might be interested in what you're doing at Medsaf or just have a general interest in the pharmaceutical or healthcare industry within Nigeria or Africa?
Yeah, just do it. That's it. But you think so much about things and then it's never going to be what you think it is anyways. Just try something.
Thank you for that. Amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Extremely enlightening conversation. It's clear that you're offering something unique, timely, and much needed on the continent. And you also have a huge passion for what you're doing and doing it for all the right reasons. And I look forward to seeing what you achieve in the near future. So thank you for taking the time out to join us on the podcast today, Vivian.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And we will speak soon.
Awesome. Bye.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.